long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Michael Baranowski, a political scientist at Northern Kentucky University. Hey everyone. So you might be wondering, why am I talking to a photographer? It's kind of an unusual interview for The Politics Guys. And in fact, at first, when I was approached by the publisher, I thought, well, why would I want to do this? And what would I possibly have to say to Lawrence Jackson? But I was curious, and so they sent me the book. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was really a lot here, and it would make for what I think would be a pretty interesting interview. And I hope you agree. You know, for a lot of reasons. For one thing, I was just recently when we saw those images of, for instance, the Situation Room under Trump with the raid on Baghdadi as compared to the compared to the Situation Room with the raid on bin Laden, and how different those images were and the power of those images, what they say about those presidents and those, administrations. And of course, White House photographers play a key role in helping to shape those images, whether it's, the cool, no drama Obama or the sort of tough America first Trump. Not only that, but being able to talk to someone who had regular access to the president really kind of gets us behind the scenes in a way I don't think we usually do. And so I was interested in talking to Lawrence Jackson for that reason as well, to get more of a sense maybe of what the president was like as a person, some of what he saw as the demands of the job, and of course the toll that the job of president takes. And finally, I was just kind of curious what it was like to be a White House photographer doing that job for, the entire Obama presidency. So I was really, in the end, very pleased that I got a chance to talk to Lawrence Jackson. I think it made for a great interview, and I hope you enjoy it. My guest today is Lawrence Jackson, an official White House photographer in the Obama administration. He's just released a beautiful book of photographs and stories about his time with the Obamas called Yes, We Did, Photos and Behind-the-Scenes Stories Celebrating Our First African-American President, which we'll be talking about today. Lawrence Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I think the place to start maybe is to talk a little bit about the job of White House photographer and how you get that job, because I got to believe it's one of the most sought after jobs in photo, at least news photojournalism. So what does it take to get a job as a White House photographer?
Well, you have to kill somebody. No. So basically, once the once the president's picked, he chooses his or her communications director or their press secretary. They then find a photographer to be the chief photographer. And usually it's someone that they've worked with in the past, maybe on a campaign, or there's a personal relationship between someone on the campaign. And in the situation with Pete Souza and the president, Pete covered him as Senator Obama for a number of years, and then he covered him a little bit during his campaign in 2008. So once you are chosen as chief photographer, then it's up to you, to the chief photographer, to choose his or her staff. And I knew Pete in D.C. just because I was working as AP photographer, and he was working for the Chicago Sun-Times. So we had a bit of a relationship.
And you mentioned in the book that you actually had to take something of a pay cut from your AP job to work at the White House. And so I imagine there might have been some conversations surrounding that. And in the end, was it worth the pay cut?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to give credit to my wife because, I told her when I got the job offer that, hey, look, this is a significant pay cut, and I'm not sure if I should take the job. And she looked at me like I was crazy and said, you will take this job and I will go back to work, but we will make it work. And it did.
Yeah. I guess it's just being able to be there for history, really, as it was unfolding, that has to be just almost priceless, really.
The the further I get away from that time, the more special it becomes because I realized he was a very special president and she was a very special first lady because their intentions were always good and they were always trying to help people. And then on top of that, just being the first African American president, there's so much pressure, when you're a president, but just to be the first one of anything, there's even more scrutiny put on you. So I realized early on that this was going to be a special ride, and it was.
Now, how many White House photographers are there? I know there are a lot of pictures, so I got to imagine there's I don't know, a sizable staff. Or what are we talking about here?
We're talking 5 photographers.
Okay.
There's the chief photographer, and then there's the assistant chief, and then there are 2 photographers. So there are 4 photographers that cover basically the president and the first lady, and then 1 photographer covers strictly the vice president. So we would produce about 9,000 images a week as a staff, and at the end, I think we're 4.2 or 3 million images.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot of pictures. Now, this obviously, right, is not a 9 to 5 sort of job.
No. It's well, it's there were moments in which I was a blur in my own household. I will admit,
yeah.
But it was a pretty good schedule for us. We'd have this thing called nights, weekend, and travel. So so Pete was always with the president most of the time. And so that required a second person to be the secondary shooter for most events. And that secondary shooter for the week would be responsible for any nighttime events, for any travel with the president, or any weekend work that involved going out president golfing or whatever. So that left the other 2 photographers with somewhat of a life every 2 weeks.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It reminds me, I talked to someone else in the Obama administration, and they had a phrase, it was living the dream, which was sort of code for, I'm just totally wiped out, but this is amazing,
Yes, I remember that phrase quite well.
Yeah. So obviously that there was a pretty significant time commitment, but was that the toughest part of the job, or were there other, particular challenges in being a White House photographer?
The challenges were, for photographers, if you cover an event in the East Room, if you covered one event, you covered 100 events in the East Room. So there's that, you have to spice up the coverage somehow. You just have to break that monotony of person speaking at the podium, handing an award off or something like that. So I would, some days I would go into the East Room with a long lens and a short lens and kind of nothing in between, or I would try different positions, or sometimes I would use different lightings for departure photos or photos in the blue room. Just to always try and, break up the monotony of what we usually shot.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about some of the pictures because it was an amazing book in that sense. Some of the pictures were just breathtaking to me, and it's tough, at least for me, to talk about photographs because it's a visual thing. But there are at least a couple of shots I hope we can talk about because they're the ones that really stood out to me. And there was one that I am literally gave me chills when I saw it.
Which one?
It was the one of the president and his family walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There was that big crowd to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the civil rights marches. And I don't know, there was something about that shot that just even thinking about it now, I don't even have it in front of me, just kind of gave me chills. And could you talk a little bit about that day and about that shot?
Well, yeah, it was, I think I said in the book, it's probably one of my top 3 or 5 speeches that I've witnessed by President Obama. And because the way the speech, when I'm taking pictures, I'm hardly listening to what the president's saying. It's
Right.
really tough to do both.
Yeah.
And in this particular situation, I did find myself listening more than I was taking pictures. And and then I guess one of my favorite parts about that photo of them crossing the bridge is if you look, you've got the freedom marchers. Some of them are in wheelchairs at this point. And then you've got the president and first lady. And then off to the left, you have Sasha Malia. You've got 3 generations of people lined up. And, one was the forebearers, and they took the beatings, they took the water hose. The 2, you've got, the president of the United States and the first lady, who are, this shining example of, what a good president and first lady would do. And then 3, you have the next generation of Americans, people who are going to, take this country forward. So, that speech, that day, that everything was really, I just thought was really special. And to me, the weird part is I wasn't even supposed to be on that trip. I was supposed to be another photographer, coworker of mine. But Pete said, well, I'd be remiss to not have the only African-American photographer on this trip.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm glad he did that.
There was another picture I really like, a totally different sort of picture here, but it was the one you took of the president and the first lady reading Where the Wild Things Are to kids at the Easter egg roll. I mean, that was that the president is making this kind of, I don't know, it's just, that really caught my attention too.
Right. Well, it's a story that they read. I think they read it every year of the Easter egg roll. And if you're a parent of young ones and you have not read that book to your kids, you need to get on that immediately.
Yeah.
Because they just, they're just so expressive, so committed, so into the thing that they're doing, especially with kids. It's just, it was great to cover them.
Well, that was one thing I loved about the book is it wasn't just the standard sort of historic moment shots, but there was this feeling of actually really kind of getting that intimacy that really kind of made me feel like I was kind of there behind the scenes. And I thought that was just a really great aspect of the book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well,
And I guess you mentioned the Obamas obviously a number of times, and of course I can't believe we've gone on this long without me asking the question that everyone wants me to ask. Of course, that's what are they like? What was your impression of them?
That's probably I think the top 3 questions are: how did I get my job? What's it like to fly on Air Force One?
Yeah.
And then the top one is probably, what are they really like?
Yeah, how could it not be, right?
Right. So the answer is, and I think the question is more interesting than the answer, because people see them on TV and interviews and whatever, and they're so drawn to them and they're so enamored by them that they think to themselves, wow, they cannot be like that in real life.
Right.
And I think I write in the book, I know I write in a book that I talk about their authenticity and how they handle people and how they handle most situations. And it can't be faked. It can't be, imitated. They are who they are. So what they're like when the camera's on is not that far off from what they're like behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, I can tell you a dozen stories where when they're in a meeting, and the first question is this policy helping people? Or how can we make things better for people? And that's, they are as genuine as they appear to be.
Now, I love when you're talking about people meeting the president or the first lady for the first time. And of course, that's the sort of situation where almost anyone would be kind of racked with nerves, at least regular people, certainly. Right. And there's this great story you tell in the book about how every once in a while you'd mess with them a little bit. I don't know if you could kind of tell that story, because I love that one.
Well, I think the story was in the Blue Room. And so sometimes you do a lot of group shots or portraits in the Blue Room with the president and first lady. And we usually have the group set up waiting for them to arrive, and then we take the picture. In this one particular group, this woman was just, she was just nervous. I could see in her face how nervous she was. And sometimes I like to have a little fun with the guests, and I'll say to them, or they'll ask me, they'll say, is there anything we should know before the president comes in here? And I'll say to them, I said, well, don't look them in the eye too long. And if your hands are clammy, offer them a fist bump and not a handshake. And some of these people see that I'm joking, and then some people just don't see it at all because they're so caught up in the moment. And yeah.
But the Obamas were pretty good at putting people at ease, right?
Absolutely. They would walk into a room, they would try and shake everyone's hand. There'd be small talk. They were great listeners. If they didn't put you at ease, it was not because of them. It was just because they were the person was just too overexcited.
Yeah.
And I've seen people cry. Sobbing just because they're overcome with emotion for meeting them for the first time.
Yeah, that's got to be, I guess, difficult to deal with. But I guess they experienced it so often that they kind of developed a way of approaching people who were just kind of overcome by the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned in the book that because you saw a lot of President Obama, including behind the scenes when the other cameras were off, I guess, is that he's a very focused person. And I imagine, I'm trying to think about being in a situation where someone's almost always taking your picture or recording you or trying to kind of grab onto some of your time. And I would imagine that focus is extraordinarily important in a president.
It is. And I thought about this a lot. And from the day one, he was this focused person. So I think he's always been like that, or it's something he developed early on in politics. But I remember times when I would be crawling around on the floor during an interview, trying to get a good shot of him. And this is, live taping, and it just did not disrupt him at all. He just carried on. And I remember when I was working for the AP covering the Bush administration, he hated those things. He hated any type of movement or anything going on while he was reading a teleprompter.
I guess it's the sort of thing that you have to get used to pretty quickly as president, because your entire life is a series of distractions, basically.
It really is.
And along the same lines, you commented on how amazing it was how he could switch gears in like an instant. 1 second he's in the Situation Room, and then a minute later he's talking to whatever the Teacher of the Year honorees or something like that. And that strikes me also as a very unusual and incredibly important skill for someone in the president's position.
It is. And I talk about like you said, the Situation Room, and the next minute he's in the Oval Office Teacher of the Year. And in the beginning, I thought that, his steely glaze or his often looking in the distance look was, something that I had done or something that Stafford had done. And it occurred to me that, it's not us that's the problem. It's whatever that's pressing on his mind at that moment is what's drawing his attention. Yet he has to be at this next event for that event. And he's got to be, he's got to be on point. He's got to be focused. He's got to be ready.
Yeah.
So, watching them, evolve into the position of president and first lady was a real treat, because you could see their evolution from day one to the last day. And it was like I don't want to say like a butterfly or a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, but it was really just a really nice way to see them develop.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the kind of the development, because of course you were there for the entire presidency, which gives you kind of a unique perspective, because a lot of people with the president, are only there for a few years and so forth. And so I'm wondering, I look at the first pictures, of course, and then there's, young Barack Obama, and he looks so kind of fresh and new, and, there's a lot of non-gray hair. And then at the end, the pictures are a lot different, obviously. And so I'm wondering, do you feel like the job, kind of wore him down or changed him or anything like that? What's your impression of that?
Well, I definitely think the job ages you. He got gray hair and I got gray hair too. So, but yeah, it's, I think the pressures of the job, President Obama used to say all the time, he says, when a decision comes to his desk, it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
All the easy ones are, taken care of below him. So, I think it takes a toll. But at the same time, I think I mentioned in my book that, he would always make the best decision possible. And he felt, I think you take comfort in the fact that when you make a decision, if you're answering these questions like, am I helping as many people as I can with this decision?
Right,
this, does this, lessen the burden or something on other people or whatever the question would be? He's asking the right questions, and I think if he gets enough of the right answers, he's made the best decision he or she could make.
Yeah. That reminded me of, I think it was a quote from, it might have been Valerie Jarrett, about how sort of the position kind of revealed the character of Barack Obama. I seem to recall, really, as opposed to changing him in any way.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And I really like that.
Yeah.
So for you personally, what were your kind of, few highlight moments? Obviously, there are a ton of them, but when you think back, there have to be a couple of moments that just stand out, I would imagine. And maybe you could, talk about those a little bit.
Well, it kind of harkens like, picking my favorite photo of my 8 years. And I really can't pick just one photo. But I think when I think about the moments, I think about the quiet moments in which I kind of pinch myself, right?
Yeah.
And that could be, we're on Air Force One, we're flying to the other side of the world. It's an overnight trip. And, I wake up and I'm flying to some country in the middle of the night on Air Force One. I would never imagine in 1,000 years when I was a kid that I'd be in that position.
Yeah.
And it's that, or when I'm in the Oval Office and I'm setting up a light and no one else is in the room, and I'm imagining, John F. Kennedy in this room, Richard Nixon in this room, just presidents of years gone by, that, there was so much history in that room alone that it quiets me in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's not, I could tell you pictures that I love, but it's those moments in which you find yourself in and you just take a moment to appreciate the moment.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you and this is kind of blends into one of my favorite photos. It's in the book where the president has just given his second inaugural address, and he's gone up the tunnel back into the Capitol, but he decides to stop and turn around and go back and look at the crowd size just one more time. And you could just see on his face that he's appreciating the moment for what it is. And it's one of my favorite photos.
Now, on the kind of flip side of things, I'm trying to put myself in your position in a way, and I would feel, I think, a certain pressure, to put it lightly, and the idea that I would ever do anything that would kind of piss off the president, what have you, would be kind of my worst nightmare. Did you have any, if maybe not nightmare moments? I remember at one point in the book, I think it's, you ask somebody, have you had your first anxiety dream yet, or something like that? So
yeah.
Did you have any moments that were worthy of those anxiety dreams?
Yeah, well, there's one instance, and it was, we were doing some portraits in the Oval Office, and we had finished taking pictures, and I started breaking down my lights, and I guess someone had forgotten to have their picture taken, and the president said, "Lawrence, can we do another picture?" "Oh, you set the lights down, or you've taken the lights down. It's not enough time." And I said, "No, sir, I can do it in 2 seconds." He says, "Okay, let's see it." And I got it up in 2 seconds, and we took the picture. And he appreciated the fact that I kept my word and keeping him on schedule.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had anxiety dreams. I've had my camera run out of card space, or I've ran out of images on my card, my camera. I've had to change batteries, in front of the president. I think I've done every probably mistake that possibly could be made. And they both have been great and very easygoing about those foibles.
Even, you mentioned they were kind of very easygoing and understanding about that, but also, right, President Obama is famously competitive, and that's something. I mean, you saw that in more than a couple of occasions, right?
Yes. He is. He's an amazing trash talker on the golf course.
Yeah.
And he will take an opponent, and this is a friend, and he will analyze everything that they're doing right there and make fun of them or try to get them off their game. And the trash talking usually goes both ways, but not really on him that much.
Yeah.
But at the end of every match, they're shaking hands, giving hugs, and they usually pose for a picture at the end.
Oh, that's cool. So, did the job? Actually, the job changed President Obama and how you saw those changes. But what about you? I can't imagine that you can work in the White House that closely with the president and first family and not be changed in some way or other. So could you talk a little bit about how the job maybe changed how you view politics, the presidency, that sort of thing?
Well, the biggest thing I noticed about politics is being on the spotlight of politics. I think the president was happy to talk policy on any subject. But when people are talking about your family or talking about, your dad jeans or your tan suit or, whatever else, that's stuff that really just is distracting.
Yeah.
So, but for me, what I learned about politics is that it's personal. When you're talking about healthcare or talking about, something that changes people's lives, and you go to a city and you're meeting the people that are affected by this, and you see it up close, it just told me that politics, it's personal. It's, it affects people's lives and it makes changes, for good or bad. And it's important to try and get it right.
Yeah. And I would guess also, earlier you mentioned the president saying, well, that easy decisions don't get to his desk. And I would imagine that in the position you were in, you probably had much more of an appreciation than almost anyone as to the incredible stress and strain of making all of those difficult decisions just consistently over the course of 8 years. That's rough.
Yeah. No, Vice President Biden used to say he had a spine of steel because of some of the decisions he would make. And I was always in awe of his calm, his resilience. There's a president who, when there was a success, he shared it with his entire staff. When healthcare, the ACA got passed, he had all the staffers up in the Truman balcony, celebrating, the decision or the law being passed. Yeah. And then when it's, something that's, there's a failure or there's a mistake, he takes the blame. He took the blame for mistakes that, as a leader, you take the blame for.
Yeah.
So I really can't say enough about his style of leadership. He cares about the people that work for him. and he cares about people that he's trying to help.
It's awfully important. Now, once your time was done in the Obama White House, you did something really kind of cool, I thought, is you conducted this survey of what was around 300 former White House staffers. And I really was interested in that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why you decided to do that and more importantly, what you found.
Why did I decide to do that? It's really funny. I think the first month and a half after leaving the White House, I did very little. But I would see, former coworkers at the White House on the different places around town. I mean, DC is really a small town if you think about the circles that you travel in. Yeah. And the big question was, how you doing? What are you doing now? Do you miss it? All this kind of like 4 or 5 questions I would ask everybody. And I was getting a kind of a range of responses. Some people were like, I miss it so much, or, no, I'm doing this great thing now. It's because of this, my time at the White House. This has, been great for me. And it just got me thinking, it's like, let's do a survey. Let me reach out to as many White House staffers as I know and see, what they're doing, how they're doing, and if they miss it, if they don't miss it. So it's just 10 questions, and I sent it out to, I think, 300 people. And I'm pretty sure it was all through LinkedIn. And the responses were, they were across the board, but they were really, I'm not sure if you know about this. I can't remember the survey that I used, but it aggregates the most popular words that are used in the questionnaire.
Right.
And I think one of my questions, what was the biggest takeaway from your time at the White House? And the biggest words that came out were, sense of family, sense of mission, pride, yes, we can, just all these, really positive words, affirmations of their time at the White House. So, I sent the survey out, and then I posted the results, and the feedback was just tremendous. People were like, thank you so much for doing this. I miss these guys, or, I was really surprised by the response.
Yeah, it was, based on the pictures in the book, I mean, just so clearly it was, an obviously memorable experience. And like I said, the pictures were beautiful, and I so enjoyed the book. I'll admit, I come from things from the left side of things. And as I mentioned to you before we got on the air, that it made me miss the Obama presidency even more. So in a way, I curse you, Lawrence Jackson, for making me feel even worse. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But thank you. Thank you so much for this book and for taking the time to join me today to talk about it.
Michael, thank you. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. We hope you liked what you heard. Listener support is what keeps the show going, and we truly appreciate it. When you become a monthly sustaining supporter of the show on Patreon, you don't just get our gratitude, you get a supporters exclusive bonus episode each and every week. Also, supporters at various levels can get additional bonuses like Politics Guys gear and access to a special supporters-only Facebook group. To learn more about all this stuff, go to patreon.com/politicsguys, or you can visit our website, politicsguys.com/support. Subscribing to the show also really helps, as does sharing episodes. Word of mouth is, of course, the best advertising, and we really would appreciate it if you tell folks about the show. Leaving reviews and ratings on whatever podcast app you use is also greatly appreciated. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do that at mail@politicsguys.com. There's also our Facebook page where you can message us, and we're posting things throughout the week. It's facebook.com/politicsguys page. Finally, we're on Twitter @politicsguys. The executive producers of the Politics Guys are Bruce Johnson, Wilma Moreno, Benji Fishman, and Andra Masker. Today's show was produced by Michael Baranowski. We'll be back with a new show on Saturday. We hope you'll join us.